So the way that I work is I take thousands of images from books and magazines, edit them down to about 100. They're very generic images from, as I said, books, magazines, catalogs. If the images themselves are beautiful or arresting in any way on their own, I'm not interested in them. And so, as I mentioned, I hated choices as much as the blank page, and I wanted every theme and variation. Newsweek had, at that time, what was a $40,000 copier. You could probably buy it now for like $2,000, but it was extremely high-end, and it made beautiful, perfect color copies. I would take one baseline image, Xerox it probably 10 or 15 times, draw on it, collage it, blow it up, make it smaller, crop it. I tried every variation on the theme that I wanted. Then I would edit them down to the best. I would bring it to a lab to create one seamless photograph. And the photographs looked like they had come from a strange parallel world. And as a result of having discovered that I like to work with found images and that I could have this Xerox machine as my resource, all of my debilitating indecisiveness was gone, and the work just started pouring out of me. And that's how I've been working for the last 30 years. This is how I found my way. It all began at Newsweek with a pile of photos and a copier. I took root images and made branches that were utterly different physically and emotionally from the source material. And these images have turned out to be more mine than any original that I had ever done. Scale has always been vitally important to my work. Even when I was a little girl, I was always drawing off the page. I wanted to make very, very large pieces. I wanted to make pieces that impacted the body, that you could walk into, that would envelop your body. And there's two pieces in the gallery, the two single bird images that I did, and they were quite large for photographs at the time that I did them, but they really weren't as large as I wanted them to go. Unfortunately, that was as big as you could print at that time, and that's the biggest archival paper that you could have at that time. I was working on a series of trees, also at that scale, and I got a fellowship to the MacDowell Colony. I walked into the studio. It was a beautiful, empty studio with a big 10-foot high by 20-foot wide wall, and I thought, this is great. Unlike my studio at home, I don't have to edit all these hundreds and hundreds of images on my desktop. I can put them on the wall. And I started to fill the wall. I had 6 rows of about 120 images in about a week's time, and I realized I love this. This was the scale I had always wanted, but because I had so stubbornly assumed that it had to be a single image, it never occurred to me that I could get to this size with multiple images. This discovery at the MacDowell Colony was one of the most important happy accidents of my career. This is how I began to do the work that I call montages, and the one that you will see in the gallery, which is called Birds and Flowers. I've been working this way for the past 9 years. Each piece takes about a year to do, and the images are they're not random scattering of images. I try thousands and thousands of combinations of hundreds of images before the piece kind of settles down and works in harmony. And I think it's kind of ironic that as someone who hates puzzles and hates crossword puzzles and hates Rubik's cubes, that this is how I have come to work. Besides working together visually, each image must also serve to enhance the overall narrative. and I think of the individual pieces as subplots to the entire piece. Storytelling is very important to my work. There is always an implied narrative. And in the montages, I have done what I think of as fracturing the narrative. It's not a straightforward linear story, and it's fragments of a story that are told out of sequence. The eye leaps from image to image, from section to section, and the brain fills in gaps of time and perception. This work seems to call to mind a variety of narrative formats, comic books, movie storyboards, film strips, call and response of music and prayer, mosaics, crazy quilts, frescoes, stained glass windows. All of my experiments were really in the service of the emotion and the story. And I've been told that this work is conceptually innovative, and I'm very flattered. But my whole reason for developing this visual language was so that I could arouse a kindred feeling in the audience. And what I hope emerges from my work is not something new, but things that are always there. I'm trying to evoke the unseen forces beneath our natural existence that connect, unite, inspire, sustain all of humanity. And what moves me the most, what absolutely delights me, is when people look at my work and they say, I know it's not real, I've never seen this before, but it feels deeply familiar. And that makes me inexpressibly happy, because I'm trying to make something that's not of our world, but of our consciousness. When I made Birds and Flowers, all I was thinking about was, is it possible in this day and age to actually make a piece that is beautiful without it being saccharine or trite or ironic? That's all that was in my mind, and I really didn't have any other vision than that. And as with all of my work, each one has its own personality, its own voice, its own language. It's very much like authors saying they can't lead the characters in the book. They just have to follow. And that was the case with this piece. I didn't think it would be so photographic. I thought there would be more drawing and collage. I didn't think that it was going to be gray and pearlescent and sort of flat looking. But over time it revealed itself, and it revealed itself to be very quiet, and it had a strange effect of both movement and stillness. I didn't think the birds would be of equal weight, and quite frankly, I thought the birds would just be a kind of a nice minor element to give some variety to the piece. But I had to be led by the piece, and I realized that the birds and the flowers were going to be equal partners. The interesting thing to me is, in this piece, as with so many of my pieces, the viewer's reaction, they can be diametrically opposed. I have had people look at Birds and Flowers and say, this is so beautiful, it's so peaceful, and other people look and say, this is so sinister, with the mist coming up and the fog. And you know, there's also, aside from it being ambiguous emotionally for some people, there's a kind of a mixed message about where this is in time and space. It could be the present. You've got cultivated roses, you have these flower beds, and then the rest of the landscape, you could almost have dinosaurs coming out of it. It's just interesting to me how this piece decided what it was going to be and how different people have interpreted it. The two bird pieces in the show, I wanted them to be about the size of a doorway, and the surface is it goes in and out of focus, and that's very, very deliberate, very conscious. I wanted the surface to not be solid. I wanted it to have an almost Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass effect. I wanted the viewer to feel that this was a doorway, which is what I achieved by the large size, and a doorway that they could go through, which is what I achieved by having the surface be broken up. And I think what was fascinating to me after I did this series was to realize here are these small creatures, and yet they're shown very, very, very oversized. They are colorful, and yet I did them in black and white. We think of them as singing and flying, and yet they're silent and they're still. They're very inwardly contemplative, and I've had people say they look like ancient creatures. One person even said they look like gods, which, of course, I love that comment. They were inspired by a statue that I saw in a museum in Florence. I was rushing between two galleries to go from one group of important paintings to another group of important paintings, and these very large statues of birds were in the corridor connecting them. And I was rushing by, not paying attention, and something compelled me to stop, turn around, and go back. They were so oversized. They were about this big, and they seemed very, very strange to me. That stuck in my mind, and I went home and I wanted to do something with birds. I wasn't sure what, but I knew that I wanted them to also be very, very large. I knew I wanted the paper to be about the size of a doorway, and I also knew that I wanted the surface of the photograph to not be solid. I wanted it to go in and out of focus, very much of an Alice in Wonderland kind of feeling through the looking glass, that if the viewer approached, they literally could walk through this piece. And I also discovered after the series was over, I was looking at them and I realized this is very strange. These creatures that are normally flying and singing were still. They're normally colorful, but this was black and white. They seem very inwardly contemplative, and they have a real dignity and reserve and a kind of remoteness. People often ask me, how do I choose my themes? And what I find interesting is that the subject matters, and it doesn't. For me, it's just a vehicle for the emotional experience that I'm trying to convey. Some series are inspired by an image, some arise from an idea, but whatever the circumstances, the sensation is always the same. I feel electrified because something, a feeling, an idea has been waiting to be expressed, and it's triggered, and now it's ready to emerge. I may not be able to initially verbalize what it is I want to express, but I am propelled by this powerful urge, and eventually, after a lot of exploration and many false starts, the imagery begins to reveal itself. I feel that my job is to keep the image true to the feeling that I'm trying to express.